I'm Katie Moussouris, Senior Security Strategist in the Security Development Lifecycle team at Microsoft. I'm here at BlueHat, speaking with Ryan Smith, Principal Research Scientist at Accuvant. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Of course.
So you're going to be talking about?
The title of our presentation is going to be Attacking Interoperability.
So tell me a little bit about the talk.
So basically we're looking at the different problems that can occur when two pieces of code are designed to work together, even though they were written in possibly different languages and by different developers in general.
So it sounds like this is a flavor of the old blended threat, that we've heard a lot about. So you can take attacks, against one application that maybe runs on an operating system or multiple operating systems, combine it with an attack that runs on one of the platforms and combine it into a much more serious attack. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Kind of, yeah. As an example, some of the vulnerabilities that have gotten disclosed and fixed so far not only affected Internet Explorer but also Office. And it's the same root vulnerability, it's just there's different attack vectors because of the interoperability of the components.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of what your research shows, have you just looked at, those specific applications, or are you looking at, sort of other technologies?
So the research is more about the abstract nature of combining two technologies and having them communicate over an agreed upon protocol. Mm-hmm. But in general, we focus mostly on Internet Explorer and Office.
So in terms of some of the ways that you would perhaps recommend doing things more securely, what can you share about that?
When you're communicating, you have to understand that each of the components trusts that things are well formatted, and when you can violate that assumption, then bad things can happen.
It's the old untrusted input scenario. Yeah. It's just, you certainly see a lot of that, in just single applications where they're trusting, sources of data that are coming in that they shouldn't be trusting.
Yeah.
So it's essentially, you're applying that same principle, but you're saying when components are talking to each other, they need to apply that principle as well.
Yeah, the neat thing we found was within interoperability layers, there was actually sort of unique vulnerability classes beyond the standard buffer overflow and integer overflow, specifically type confusion, and we found transitive trust vulnerabilities within those architectures.
So tell me a little bit about type confusion. Sounds pretty straightforward. Tell me about the transitive trust issues.
So basically, when a component trusts another component, we'll say component A trusts component B, if component B relies upon services offered by component C, when component A uses component B, it accidentally, sometimes accidentally, gives that trust out to component C, mm-hmm. even though they may not have been written with the same sort of security goals in mind.
So how would a developer, who's writing these applications and these components, how would they go about ensuring that this transitive trust problem doesn't happen? Is it a technical solution, a documentation solution, some combination of both?
So they need to be very cognizant of the types of trust that they're extending to other components, and at the same time they need to rely on security architectures where the security checks don't need to be made by the individual components, and rather there's a larger overarching architecture where the same checks can be performed unilaterally. As an example, one of the vulnerabilities we found with transitive trust was that we could actually have a trusted ActiveX control launch a secondary ActiveX control that had already been kill-bitted, mm-hmm. and sort of that was violating the trust model that the browser had. And there have been improvements to the browser, but I'm hoping that the next generation of the browser will have a more unilateral architecture for that sort of authorization of the different components.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to your talk, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.